Hello everyone and welcome to Reasoned Heretic. Apologies that I haven't done a video for the last couple of weeks. Unfortunately, I've had some personal issues and I've been overwhelmed with depression and other things. The really big item in the news obviously recently has been the inauguration of President Trump. And I thought I should probably do something with some commentary on that subject. The problem being that so much has been said and written about President Trump and his presidential run in 2024 and his victory and the inauguration. And it'll be very difficult to find a new angle that adds value, that gives a perspective that perhaps hasn't been discussed elsewhere. And I thought I might delve into the term, the acronym MAGA, Make America Great Again, and why, in my view, it's such a clever acronym. So the term MAGA, I believe, and I'll explain why, has a subconscious appeal to Trump's voters. MAGA is actually the Latin female form of magus. Magus is a magician. So MAGA would be a sorceress. And in that sense alone, it captures the spirit, if you like, and creates a zeitgeist. So as I say, magus is Latin for magician. Many years ago, I read a novel, and it was The Magus by John Fowles, written in the 1960s, and it was about a guy called Nicholas Earth, who was a young British graduate teaching English on a small Greek island. And Earth became the subject, while exploring the island, of psychological illusions played upon him by a magician who lived on the island, that became increasingly intense, and it's fair to say continually undermined the protagonist and indeed the reader's sense of reality. So going back to Trump, MAGA is also, of course, a term that is deeply rooted in Christianity. The Magi were the wise men who came to visit baby Jesus and brought with them gifts called frankincense and myrrh from afar. So already this term MAGA sounds like, or has some kind of etymological rooting in something that's spiritual, that's mystical, that's captivating, enigmatic, and indeed has ties to the Christian religion. Now, it may be argued, and I'm going to make this case, that President Trump, now grandfathered in, obviously for some time in the literal sense, but also in terms of his position and his maturity, could be said to be the archetypal medieval sorcerer king. And certainly, I would argue he fuses at least three of the four Jungian, that's Carl Jung's, mature masculine foundational archetypes. Those being the king, the warrior, and the magician. Think perhaps of King Arthur and Merlin, but fused into one, with a little assistance from his friends and confidants. So let me go through the characteristics of these archetypes as postulated by Carl Jung. First of all, examining the king. The king archetype provides order, stability, and calm. Trump, of course, has achieved peace through strength and order. The ceasefire now in Gaza, where previously there was chaos. He's promised to bring an end to the conflict in Ukraine. So he's brought peace abroad, but he's also brought order and stability at home. That is in the United States, through refunding the police and boosting border security. The next characteristic of the king archetype is that the king is generative. He helps the younger generation so that they can flourish. Now, some who are politically opposed may make the case, well, Trump's policies create tax cuts for the very wealthy, and they reduce regulation, which ostensibly, or at least theoretically, creates protections. But of course, that isn't necessarily always true. And many organizations, that is, state apparatus, exist only to benefit themselves and to create rules and regulations and controls over people that actually reduce the incentives for people to enter into business and to flourish and to create employment and create jobs. And the tax burden that is levied on the population means that people have less expendable income and less control over their lives and become more dependent on the state. And these are all political discussions, but the point is, policies that reduce inflation, but also, I would say, on a cultural level, policies that give young American people meaning and purpose in their lives through identity and pride and belonging, not in divisive groups dividing people along the lines of race and religion and gender, but unite people under one nation. That gives younger people hope. And the next characteristic of the king archetype is someone who creatively partners with the queen, that being the female aspect of the psyche. And I'm not going to say too much on this one, but obviously Melania is really archetypally feminine, if you like. And by her side, she heightens his masculinity. Trump, of course, supports healing, wholeness, and integration. Another characteristic of the king archetype, by forming strategic alliances with former Democrats, Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. RFK Jr.'s reform of food regulation. This all supports well-being, this all supports wholeness, it all supports healing of the obesity epidemic in the United States. And it brings integration, it brings people together across those political divides. The next characteristic of the king archetype is reasonable and rational. Now here, many may argue, I think with some reason in this case, that Trump may fit this description less well. He is prone to egotistic self-glorification and narcissism, undoubtedly, but he is also open to reason. And he will take reasoned approaches. He will appoint the best person for the job based on their meritocratically determined suitability and experience and ability to perform that role well. And he will listen to others and exercise judicial caution. And finally, looking at the characteristics of the king, he maintains integrity of being and purpose. And I'll come onto this. I think this is something that repeats itself through all the three Jungian archetypes that I've mentioned, but Trump has an alpha personality demonstrating direction, purpose, and a strong mission. And of course, he has a strong brand, and that really maintains the integrity of his being and gives him a very strong sense of purpose. I'm going to come on to the magician now, the second of the three Jungian archetypes that I've cited. And I would argue that Trump more strongly resembles the king archetype than the magician, but he also harbors important elements of the magician, perhaps as much as from what he's undergone, notably his miraculous survival in the assassination attempt, and his showmanship from The Art of the Deal, The Apprentice USA, his TV appearances, to his rallies and the signing of the executive orders in public most recently, creating almost miraculous, long-awaited transformations on stage. Is that not what a magician does? The magician archetype is highly knowledgeable, with a capacity for deep thinking. Some may argue Trump does not think deeply, and I would disagree. I would say Trump is smarter than he appears, and in fact highly knowledgeable on matters that are important, and very capable of deep thought when he wants to be. British people berate him as stupid, but I would say they have a certain arrogance in doing so, and a very narrowly constrained understanding of intelligence. Of course, Trump lacks the pretensions and verbosity of an academic, but he is intelligent by virtue of being an alpha personality. Let me explain. And Trump is intelligent by virtue of being an alpha personality because he's singularly not distracted by self-doubt, and he's highly goal-orientated, making him an excellent candidate for his role, the ultimate leadership role. A man who can be, through his confidence and lack of self-doubt, through his purposeful activity, be respected and feared in equal measure. Trump is not himself a knower and master of technology, that being another characteristic of the magician archetype. But he is, via the influence and contribution of the tech bros, as they're referred to, Elon Musk has trailblazed the course through his transformation of Twitter into X, through the guaranteeing of free speech on his platform. And of course, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook and Jeff Bezos of Amazon have followed suit. One can argue for whether that's for material gain, for profit reasons, or whether they have been ideologically converted. But the effect is that Trump has these knowers and masters of technology behind him. The next characteristic of the magician is someone who's able to guide the process of transformation. And Trump's presidency is certainly transformative. It is a marked departure from the liberal world order, from what has gone before, from what, to use Kamala Harris's terms, has been. Trump's his ability to secure peace deals, in effect, through backed up military threats and strong-armed trade policy, tariffs and sanctions, that indicates a knowledge of almost a secret and hidden knowledge to many who haven't been in business. But it certainly has a mystical and divine quality about it. A magician is also someone who spends a large amount of time, energy, and money to be initiated into the realms of secret power. And I would say that Trump has undergone ordeal by election. He spent an inordinate amount of time, energy, and his own money into his ass. He held no less than 900 rallies in his 2024 presidential run at the tender age of 78. And so he's invested a huge amount of time and is now reaping the rewards of that. The magician also possesses an enormous amount of power, which of course the President of the United States does. And I think that's self-evident through everything that Trump does. And finally, the magician can cleverly deflate arrogance in others. And Trump is very notably able to bring his opponents down to size and doesn't hesitate to do so, whether that's telling Hillary Clinton that she'll be in jail or many other very incisive comebacks that he's pulled off. I'm going to go on to the warrior archetype now and examine how Trump meets the characteristics of this archetype. So the warrior is characterized by men who are energizing, motivated, and focused. Trump, as I've already observed, is phenomenally focused in his own mission, but also motivates and energizes those around him. He has magnetic or maganetic energy, and he can captivate his audience at his rallies, in his speeches. The warrior takes an offensive rather than a defensive attitude towards life. And perhaps nothing demonstrates this more than Trump's ability to get up and give fist bumps after being shot in the ear. But more generally, Trump tends towards being proactive and taking initiative rather than waiting to see what happens. The next characteristic of the warrior is someone who's ready to leap into battle, and Trump is ready like no one else to fight his enemies. To fight those battles, and I don't mean literal military battles, I mean battling through the courts, through lawfare, battling through the political process, through campaigning, through his rallies and through his speeches and his fighting spirit. And next we come to the warrior being someone who's alert and awake, someone who doesn't sleepwalk through life. Trump, in fact, allegedly survives on 4 to 5 hours sleep a night, which is not necessarily optimal for anyone, but just demonstrates his determination and his motivation to get things done and to be active and to feel that he needs to be busy and kept busy. And of course, Trump also keeps abreast of US and international events. Trump knows what he wants and how to get it, and that's another characteristic of the warrior archetype, and something perhaps more than anything else that is characteristic of Trump. He is confident, he's assertive, dominant, and a natural leader. Next in the characteristics of the warrior, we have someone who possesses clarity of mind and razor-sharp evaluation skills, discernment. Trump is politically astute and knows precisely what the issues that matter to his voters are, without overthinking them. Another attribute of the warrior as someone who knows his limitations and capabilities. And this perhaps is where Trump falls back a bit, because he is, as we've set out, very egotistical and perhaps lacking in self-reflection to an extent. But I think he does reflect on himself more than he shows to the world. I think in his public appearance, he wants to be seen to be very self-confident and to demonstrate that he is uncompromising and proving to the world that there's no one greater than him. But it's the hallmark of anyone who's successful that they're able to question themselves, that they're able to think critically about themselves and correct their mistakes. And so Trump must have done that, and he must be capable of that. And I have no doubt that behind his bravado of his facade, his public appearance, inside he's very capable of knowing his limitations and thinking very strategically and carefully about what to do. And the final characteristic of the warrior archetype is someone who is loyal to something bigger than himself, devoted to a cause. And yes, of course, for all his self-aggrandizement and the thrill of his triumphs, Trump ran for president with the same energy that he would commit to any endeavor, because he's motivated by God and he's motivated by love of his nation. And he's doing this ultimately because of his loyalty to something far, far greater than himself.